So I was learning about the spleen, and I started to get interested in how researchers write about it. What is some of the general context which the spleen is talked about? Some of the associated organs or systems around it. And yeah, kind of got curious, so I wanted to see which words most often collocate around the spleen. So collocate basically means which types of words are likely to occur around a certain word more than compared to around other words. To begin our search, we need to make sure we've got the right words, because just typing spleen, I'm going to miss out on some key data. So I'm going to refine my search first in the word tab like I showed you in the previous video. Not too interested in low range. I'm going to sort by range, and I know that spleen can also be plural, so I want to include the S on there with the wildcard. But I also know that spleen can come as an adjective. So I'll search my terms like this, and let's see, I got spleen, spleens, splenic. I don't feel like I need splenocytes. I mean, do I? What are splenocytes? Okay, splenocytes are white blood cells that are in the spleen, like B cells and T cells. I might want to include that, but I think I'm a little bit more interested in the organ itself and not splenocytes. Anyway, it's not a ton of data, so I'm probably not missing out a whole lot. So I'll just do Control C for that. And now I'm going to go to collocate. Use the OR operator. So now I'll be getting the collocations of spleen, spleens, and splenic. Okay. In some ways, not too surprising. Liver, lymph, cells, nodes. L and S. Oh, right, lymph nodes. It's not always easy to see what it is without the capitalization. You can change the settings if you want to include case sensitivity in your searches, but generally that's more trouble than it's worth. Okay, pretty nice. I'm interested in a lot of this data. So you'll find that the sorting by likelihood, which is the default setting, is generally pretty good. And one of the reasons to go to Word at first is to check how much frequency you have. So since we are searching terms that adds up to about 900 words or more, we have a fairly good sample size. So I can turn the range up higher. I think maybe if I do a minimum range of 4, it might be a little bit easier to see what's going on. Now, the likelihood metric is fine, but it casts a wide net. So you'll get a lot of words that are important, but you're also going to get words like and other kinds of words that are highly frequent and also just associated with many other words. So CD probably, yeah, is associated with the spleen, but it's also associated with other things, and were is obviously all over. Same with in. So we do have some good data in here, but it's probably more than we actually need. So I'm more likely to search by effect. And so I put in sort by effect, but it still hasn't quite worked yet, so you have to push start again. Now I'm getting words that are a little bit more to what I'm looking for. So again, we get the lymph nodes at the very top this time. And just to briefly describe the difference between likelihood and effect. Effect is mutual information, if you're familiar with that term. It takes the word as a fraction of its total representation in the corpus, and then helps to match that with your search terms. So LNS, lymph nodes, is not super frequent in the entire corpus. But when it does occur, it occurs next to spleen or within 5 to the left or 5 to the right words of our search term. That's what all of this data means. And now, actually, having effect being sorted first, we get kind of interesting word like inguinal. Cool. Yeah, a type of a lymph node. It's only 4 on its range. Pulp. What's pulp? Okay. It seems like I might be able to read it a little bit easier if I sort 1 to the left, but watch what happens. If I do 1 to the left, I probably also want to do 1 to the right, and then maybe we'll do 2 to the right. Now when we push start, now we've told it to get all of the data for spleen and everything. So now we've actually made trouble for ourselves, but all you do, you go back to collocate and click it again. Okay, oh, now it's quite easier to see what pulp is saying. Red pulp versus white pulp. Cool. What is this? I think this is some more interesting Wikipedia things for me to do. You see, I didn't get trained as a biologist, so I learn a lot by doing this. I don't know about you guys. This might already be well known to you, or at least in your own language, but perhaps you're able to teach yourself some English by clicking around this way. I certainly teach myself English doing this. So, mesenteric, not surprised to see that on here. MZ, marginal zone. Cool. Right, the part of the spleen is the red and white pulp and also the marginal zone. But we also get words like suspensions and sacrificed, which are just very commonly found in the methods section. And so we're not necessarily getting lots of information from that. Naive. What is naive? Naive B cells, naive T cells. Oh, this is nice. Okay, so we can see different ways to use the adjective form of splenic versus the noun form of spleen. So, for example, isolated from the spleens of naive mice. Frequency of naive T cells in the spleen versus naive splenic T cells. That's kind of cool. So if you are writing the same phrase all the time, like cells of the spleen, B cells of the spleen, CD8 cells of the spleen, to repeat yourself too often is not necessarily good style. So this is one way to see how different people have been writing, and you can get ideas that way. Monocytes. Right. Monocytes are associated with bone marrow and the spleen. So you see, even though spleen doesn't occur right next to monocyte, like you might find if you search for the cluster, using the collocate helps you to see how wider lens of things here. Although it's noisy as well. This is really getting to the limits of relevant or significant. So, for example, you see even that spleen has come back. So, how does spleen get associated with spleen? Well, it goes across the sentence, right? A normal physiological feature, liver, spleen, were selected. Skin, liver, spleen, and small intestine. Right? So the spleen is counted multiple times here, even in the same article. And so this can be a little bit of an issue, especially if the window span is 5L to 5R. So putting the window span from 4 to the left and 4 to the right will reduce noise. So let's see what happens here. Okay, so we still have pulp and lymph nodes, mesenteric. We may be able to, marginal is higher than it was before. So mutual information is said to be very robust up until down until about 6. And then between 6 and 3, it is suggestive, but it requires investigation. I think it's fair to say that all of these words above 6, they really do seem to show a high affinity for things splenic. In here we still get many. I mean, certainly marginal is, but we're also getting sacrificed, which is just a more generic term like suspensions. And yeah, unfortunately, we still are getting spleens in the data. One way to avoid that might be actually to increase the range. With this much data, and if we're seeing spleens get into here, I'm a little bit tempted to turn the range up. And I'm starting to think that if I were to copy this, it's going to be a lot more interesting. But I'm not likely to go much below 3. So we do see naive ranked higher here. Unfortunately, it looks like we have lost monocytes. So, you know, it's worth playing with these metrics a little bit, but for me, I try to keep it around 4L, 4R, the range between 4 and 5. So, what have I learned doing this? Well, I've been able to see the most common organs and systems that are associated with the spleen. I've been able to see that it appears in the methods section quite a lot, along with the different varieties of how to use it as an adjective or a noun, like splenic, blood cells, or blood cells from the spleen. And that might help me to change up my writing a little bit more. I have actually used it as a learning method for some of the parts of the anatomy. But, you know, depending on your level of knowledge, I'm assuming that many of you have already gotten a pretty good knowledge of the spleen. This may or may not have been helpful. I just wanted to do this demonstration with a word that was general, just to serve as an example of how this tool works. However, I think this collocation tool really shines when you're analyzing verbs that are like illuminate or illustrate, to see what kind of nouns and adverbs travel with those, or abstract nouns like variation or association. And we'll do a video on that sometime in the future.